in terms of that legacy technology infrastructure piece, it's really a byproduct of the kind of storm that we find ourselves in now, like underinvestment, really long, complex procurement cycles, and the scale of the estate you have to be dealing with here. A lot of these systems, if we look at the long procurement cycles, have been introduced with shorter term needs and realistically needs of that current time. Unfortunately, they've become pretty deeply embedded. If you think about analogies such as the NHS is like a car engine, what's happened over a period of time is these technology changes have been implemented as almost like a cog. It's just been added onto this engine, and so changing it now is really difficult. But it was done so it could solve a need of that time without kind of considering the whole infrastructure estate that it was latching onto. So I think that's the main issue, and now changing that is going to be challenging for all NHS organisations. Very doable, but challenging. But the impact on staff and things like that is access to information is very difficult, and actually then that translating down to the patient. So in short terms, that actual ability to innovate is going to be pretty hard unless they start to look at the infrastructure as a bit of a priority, to be honest. If we look at the leaders side first, it's really reputational based. There seems to be a bit of a thought in the NHS, and actually wider than that, to be honest, where it's never going to happen to me type of thing. There's actually been 68 trusts that have been impacted by a cyber attack, which is quite stark if you think about, what that means in percentage terms for the whole ecosystem. So from that leadership perspective, it's going to be reputational for the organisation and for the individual in charge. There's steps they can take to secure that, but they need to happen sooner rather than later, to be honest with you. For staff, I think there's a common trend at the moment around dissatisfaction, real stress in the workplace. That's not going to get better if their network's unsecure, their systems are at risk, they can't access data promptly, and they're having to do long and frustrating workarounds. That's not going to solve the situation. It's just going to make staff even more stressed and burnt out, and we're going to find more good staff leaving the NHS for rosier fields, put it that way. And then from a patient perspective, we always talk about how patient data, this and that, but actually we forget what that means. That data is a patient's life. It's everything about them. It's their ailments, their illnesses, all information about them, which is incredibly personal. So that, when we don't secure it, has a massive issue in terms of trust for a patient. Like, why should they trust us trust the NHS, with that data if we're not doing the utmost we can to try and secure it? I think that really bleeds into why probably people are looking to go more private nowadays, if I'm honest with you. So one of the biggest risks is pretty much assuming that what's worked in the past is actually going to work today. Technology's changed in terms of cyber criminals trying to get access to the networks. All these legacy VPNs and legacy firewalls just are not fit for purpose anymore. And leading into that, another major risk is the visibility aspect of this, or the fact that there's not really any of it there. I have a lot of conversations with NHS organisations and people within it, senior, junior, mid-level, whoever it is. They don't know how their organisation is set up. I spoke to a federation the other day who said it's managed by X organisation and we don't have any idea what's in it. That is a real problem, because if you don't understand what's in it, how can you actually ensure that data is protected? And you put a heck of a lot of trust in another organisation to do that. So that visibility aspect is really important. Who's accessing it in terms of your network, and where those vulnerabilities actually lie, so we can fit the NHS mantra and be proactive and not reactive when it comes to threats and things like that. But then I guess also from an aspect of investment, there's a lot of money going into the NHS that's all focused around tech and this analog to digital shift. If we do not upgrade the infrastructure that a lot of these organizations have, that analog to digital shift is going to be way more expensive and going to take a lot more time, purely because they're going to build on shaky foundations, So those are kind of the key areas in terms of risk. I think there's obviously that risk in terms of cybersecurity, but the risk of not getting the most out of the system is pretty paramount as well. Yeah, it's a really top of mind question right now, really top of mind element that I imagine CTOs, CIOs will be thinking a lot about, purely because they've got to improve their security posture, but the money is realistically not there to do it. So it's about how can they reduce the current spend but improve the current posture. And I think they've got to approach that strategically. They've got to move away from siloed individual solutions, and they've got to look at that legacy connectivity and adopt a more integrated, cloud native platforms and all those type of things. But the main aspect of it is it's got to be flexible. It's really changed. The NHS is changing massively, and we cannot get tied in to these long-term, inflexible structures from some suppliers that really kind of suit the supplier and they don't suit the NHS. So from that side of things, we need to look at tools and how we can remove them, but how can we get the most out of what we're paying for from that side to enable secure scaling and that flexible outlook, so they can actually make the most of their spend, basically. I think it's a really poignant question, and one that's coming up a lot in my conversations when, if you look at the EPRs that are out there, Epic's a fantastic example, how much money has been spent on it in the millions for all the ones that procured it so far. But the conversations that I have with trusts and other organizations is it's not really being used for the potential that it should be. And that is down to, yes, there's an element of staff training, and that's part of it, but it's really down to the network infrastructure. They cannot support that level of system and that complexity of system across their infrastructure. And that means that if we look at expenditure and money being wasted, that's a perfect example. It's not being wasted on an EPR, but we should have implemented a better network infrastructure beforehand to make the most of it. So now systems and trusts and whoever it is who are utilizing us, it's not just Epic, there's other systems in here as well, are unable to make the most of what they've paid for, purely because we haven't actually enabled our infrastructure to support it in the way that it should have. Yeah, so I think consolidation is one piece of this puzzle, but if we relate this specifically to the current priorities within kind of reducing inefficiencies, the key one that keeps coming to me is wasted bandwidth. It's a very simple way healthcare organizations can utilize what we do and our provision through an only pay kind of what you use type of structure. It's kind of a commonality, and it's something that I came across relatively recently with an organization where they were paying for way more bandwidth than they actually needed, purely because they did a migration piece and they had to pay for that amount, but on a day-to-day basis, they just didn't need it. So if you look at inefficiencies and spend which isn't necessary, that's a perfect example of that. So, to the question, with these systems, losing deficit funding, we really can support here. You drive down the overall deficit, bring systems into a self-sustaining kind of realm here. Alongside cost savings through unused bandwidth, there's going to be, there's there's kind of an element of savings here through more resilient, flexible networks and able to support kind of standing up new technologies as well. But the key thing that I'll go back to is that bandwidth, that wasted bandwidth point. That's such a point and such an issue that is part of the legacy telco approach of doing it that way and not really fully offering value for what they're providing. And that's something that we hope to change.